Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and for your attention to this important issue. And thank you, Secretary James and Secretary Kendall, for being here to discuss this with us and for your service to our country. I think we can all agree that in the coming years, assured access to space is going to continue to be more and more important with each passing year. And so I wanted to talk about what you think about the following question. As we discuss both the short-term and the long-term considerations that have to be taken into account for space launch, I'm interested in understanding how the Department of Defense and to some extent defense contractors might be looking toward the horizon for new, perhaps non-traditional forms of space launch technology that might be more cost-effective than our current technology. So can you discuss any steps the Department might have taken to consider alternative forms of technology, such as advances in solid rocket motors, and do you believe that exploring new launch services instead of just exploring new engines might be the most effective way to end our reliance on Russian space launch technology?
So I definitely believe, Senator, that that we need to expand our horizon and keep focusing on the launch capability in its totality, of which the engine is a key component, but it's not the only component. So I will say that up front. I will also say we're open to whatever types of, particularly this year with the NDAA written as it is, what other types of rocket propulsion systems in a full and open competitive way could lead to having new competitors and new capabilities to get us to space. That's what this is in part all about. And indeed, the solid motor application is one that there has been an award made under one of these other transaction authorities. So we are open to this, and there are fantastic developments in the commercial world. In my opening statement, I talked about how we are following them, we're celebrating them, we're putting some of our resources and time and energy toward trying to help them get there from here, because we will all benefit from it. So totally open to it, and one of the awards went in that direction.
Now, my understanding that the market for these small payload launches is growing in the United States, and it's also growing around the world. As you know, the Russians have been converting ICBM motors into launch vehicles for smaller payload missions. And this is kind of a low-cost approach that has attracted a lot of commercial users from around the world, a lot of customers from all over the world, including customers in the United States. The Air Force, if I'm not mistaken, stores more than 800 American ICBMs at a cost of about $17 million per year. So at this point in time, when the United States is trying to reduce our reliance on Russian companies for space launches, and it's also trying to find savings within our defense budget, do you think that we could explore allowing domestic commercial use of our excess ICBM motors as long as proper inventory control measures were put in place? Is that a possibility?
If you'll allow me to go back and confer on that, but again, I'm open to any of these new ideas. I don't believe, however, that those ICBM motors would have sufficient power to launch the types of satellites that we're talking about in our EELV program, but perhaps there might be other applications that we should be thinking about. So if you'll allow me to go back and explore that.
Okay. Secretary Kendall, you seem to be nodding. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'm not aware of the possibilities there, but I think it's worth exploring. But I think, as Secretary James indicated, it'd be for smaller launches. We do want to exploit the technologies that are in development, like the one Senator McCain mentioned. But we want those investments to be part of a path to assured launch service providers. And that's the distinction between just spending money on propulsion and hoping that these commercial ventures are successful and ultimately give us what we need, or actually getting on a contractual path that gets us there for sure and provides the services that we need. That's the difference between the two approaches we've been talking about.
Right, right. So it's not just about the motors, it's also about the launch services. Yeah, I'd appreciate any information you can get back to me on that as a follow-up. And assuming there are some that would work, I question whether it would make sense to prohibit American launch providers from purchasing excess ICBM motors for commercial use, while allowing Russians to take all of the business in that market, assuming there would be a market there. Thank you both, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.